You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting to the UK and beyond.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Haunted Histories with your host Penny G. Morgan, right here on Parasearch Radio.
Hello and a very warm welcome and a very good evening to everyone listening to tonight's Haunted History, The Death Car. Before I go any further, for all my American listeners, a very happy 4th of July to you all. I do remember when I used to work for an American firm, albeit in London, but it was an American firm. The 4th of July was one of my favourite days. Not so much, because of the history behind it, but they used to bring a popcorn machine in. So you'd have a lovely smell of popcorn cooking, wafting around the office. It was, yes, it was a very pleasant one, that one. But anyway, so happy 4th of July to all my American guests who are listening. And could be that's why I coordinated so that it was an American guest I had on the show tonight. Possibly. You never know. Stranger things have happened. So how are we all? What's everyone been up to? What have you been doing? Where have you been? Who have you been seeing? Tell me. Come in the chat room and tell me what you've been up to and what's going on and all that kind of thing. And if you've done any investigations lately, I want to know, people. I want to know. So, for all those Brits who are dealing with the heat wave that apparently is going to carry on until at least August, I'm actually quite pleased about that, really, because, I like the hot weather, but I hope everyone's coping well and not finding it too difficult. So what have we been up to at Parasearch Radio? It's been a little bit of a quiet week, really. It's nothing really to announce apart from have you gone and subscribed to our YouTube channel yet? Hi Kerry, have you gone and subscribed to our YouTube channel yet? If you haven't, go over there because you can get to listen to all the shows and there's extra features that are going to be going up there as well. So do subscribe to that and do keep in touch with us and let us know what you've been up to. Now, I'm actually not going to talk for too long before I start playing my interview because my guest is a lovely young gentleman by the name of Karlo Zuzic, and he is with... Hi, Mark! He is with... On time, Mark. I'm impressed. Yay! Gold star for you, even if you did insult me on Facebook yesterday. In joke, you'd have to check out Mark's page, Fenland Paranormal, to find out what he said to me. There was me trying to be all fun, and he made out that I'd said somebody couldn't share their pages on his page. Well, told him he was going to be in detention or he was going to get a test after tonight's show, which is probably why he's tuned in so early. Anyway, Karlo is one of the co-founders of a group called the Ohio Researchers of Banded Spirits, or Orbs, if you work it out. And he's based in Ohio. And, well, we're going to be talking about something called the Death Car, which also, where it's now based, has links to the worst serial killer that Cleveland and possibly the state of Ohio ever knew back in the 1930s. A person who they still don't know who it was, who went by the nickname the Torso Killer. But we're going to be talking about this in the interview, so without much ado, why don't I just play that out for you? Enjoy! Okay, and on tonight's show of Haunted Histories, I've told you all about it. We've got a guest talking to us all the way from Ohio. in the USA. And our guest, he's a TV star. He's been on television and everything. So, you know, we go out all out to get you good guests on this show, I'm telling you. And what we're actually going to be talking about is something, the episode of this particular show that it was where I saw it on, is something called The Death Car. Now, it is as horrible as it sounds, if I'm completely honest, but the stories, the paranormal stories around it are very, very interesting. And it also, interestingly enough, links into possibly the worst serial killer that Ohio has ever known. But before I go any further, I'm going to introduce my guest. It's Mr. Karlo Zuzic. Hi, Karlo. How are you?
How you doing, Penny? I'm doing good. I don't know about the TV star part of it, though.
You've been on TV. What else would you call
I have,
you?
but I don't know about being a star. But yeah, I've done several shows, and but yeah, it's because I love the field.
As we do. Well, we've just been talking for nearly 3/4 of an hour about it before we started the interview, so I think we could both say that. Well, thank you ever so much for joining me tonight, Karlo. I do appreciate it. I know I've been hounding you sort of since the beginning of this year to do a show, because the Death Car episode, which we're going to talk about shortly, it really struck a chord with me. It was, and we're going to talk about the events that led up to everything and your experiences there and all of that in a little while. But I know that you're a very seasoned investigator and seasoned paranormal person. How exactly did you get into it?
Everything started when I was a kid. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and my family came from Yugoslavia. And, you know, they were immigrants. They came here, you know, looking for the dream just like everybody else did. And, you know, finally my dad got a good job here. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I came from a good family, and they took care of me very well. But, you know, at one time my parents bought a house. And I remember, you know, when we went to look at this house, I always had these weird feelings about it when we came in there. I mean, it just had... It's almost like someone was watching me. It had this negative vibe to it. Mm-hmm. But, you know, a kid, you know, I wouldn't really think anything of it. And when we moved in, that's when things started to happen. I experienced seeing a shadow man. Mm-hmm. I actually had an apparition jump on my back and hold me down like it was choking me. It actually spoke in a language, like I couldn't even understand what it was saying. And I started to pray, and the only thing I remember it saying in a deep voice was, "God won't save you," and then it released me. But this thing would stand in my doorway and just sway back and forth and stare at me, but it had no facial features. You could just see the silhouette. Right. So, you know, those experiences kind of led me to what I'm doing today. You know, I got a little older. I did a little bit of just ghost watching, we'll call it. And then from there, I decided one day, you know, I want to help other people. I want to understand more of what happened to me. And I got involved just by research, and I found this group that Chris Page had started. It was called Orbs, Ohio Researchers of Abandoned Spirits. He just started the group, and I contacted him, and, you know, I came on board, and we've been 11 years strong now, and with, you know, doing a lot of amazing things. We've done over 400 plus investigations to date. We've probably raised well over $60,000-$70,000 for the local historical societies and charities. You know, we've done a lot for like animal shelters and stuff. You know, everything just kind of evolved from that moment, and we've done a lot of amazing things, just like TV that you've mentioned. We were blessed to do. We've been on Animal Planets, The Haunted. We've done biography channels, My Ghost Story. We've done history channels, Haunted History, The Torso Murders, Destination America, Paranormal Survivor. We've done Destination America's Haunted Case Files, which is actually called Paranormal Investigators out in the UK.
Yep. Which you've done with our friend Richard Estep. He's on that as well, I believe, isn't he? Yeah.
And I think he's on season 2 also. And
I believe he is. Yeah.
So that was, you know, a lot of good things happen, and we use that to publicized when we do events to bring people in to donate money to these historical societies. So, and then we also did Japanese TV. We actually were on Japanese TV on Fuji TV. So we were blessed with a lot of cool things, and from that point on, it is what it is today. It kind of grew into its own thing, and I'm real proud of it.
So how did you get into the TV side of things? Did you approach them? Did they approach you?
They approached us. What happened was back in 2000 and I think it was 2009. We were contacted by Animal Planet, and they had a new series called The Haunted, which was they were doing a series about the animals' perspective, how they react to paranormal, like spirits and stuff like that. So they contacted us. We did 2 episodes for season 1, and then we did 1 full hour episode for season 2. And from that point on, I think once you're in the system with producers and you get to know them, they move around quite a bit. So, then you get contacted by another one that's got a reference from another person. So it just evolves into what it is. They kind of contact you now, and they're looking for stories. We've done a lot of media, so when they actually Google stuff, will pop up, and that's how we get contacted.
Okay. So what's been your favorite experience to date in the paranormal world?
Favorite experience? I don't know if it was I'm not going to say it was more of seeing an apparition, which is cool, but helping families. That's the thing I love doing about this. When you come to a house, I remember pulling up to a family's house, and they were being tormented by a spirit. And the kids, there was a boy, he was probably about 11 years old, and there was a girl that was about 7 years old. And I remember pulling up, and the boy ran up and hugged me. He goes, "Oh my God, you're here to help us. You're here to help us." The feeling you get, just by having that makes you just want to do this even more. And, that to me is one of my favorite, and meeting the people, and every family we help, they become a part of my family. So, I think that's my favorite part of being an investigator. Experience wise, I actually seen 1 full body apparition. To me, that told me that there was definitely something out there, and I want to look more into it and see what else is there.
So would you say it's more of the private cases that caused orbs to come about? I mean, I know you said you came into it just after Chris, but was that the sort of the impetus to arrange orbs?
Yes, absolutely. Because Chris had another person that was involved, which is not in a group anymore, but she was having experiences, and that's how it all started. And he's like, "Hey, let's get a recorder." They watched the TV shows, and they figured, hey, they could do the same thing. So they did that, and they got a recording, and that's where it evolved. He said, "Hey, let's do this. Let's open this up to other people and see if we can help others." And that's how it all started, and that's our main goal. Yeah, I love doing historical places. Don't take me wrong. Seeing some of the, coolest places around. You got your Mansfield prison, your penitentiaries, and just really neat places with a lot of history. But going in and helping the family, that's our main goal. But I just love doing that because you're giving up help. They can't reach out to anybody else. They can't call the police. They can't call anybody else. And, for us to come in and do that is so gratifying for us.
Yeah. It must be. I mean, I know with some of the sort of the famous stories we had in the UK, like the Enfield hauntings, as a family, I believe they did actually call the police to begin with. And the police were like, "Well, what do you want us to do?" And so they went to the papers, and it was the newspapers that kind of got people like Guy Playfair and all of that involved. I think it was was it the SPR, the Society for Cyclical Research, I think they were attached to, I think, off the top of my head. But it was those, because most people that, you wouldn't know who to contact. It's not so bad when you've got, a lot of my friends know that I do this in my spare time, so I'm sure if one of them had an issue, that I'm probably one of the first people they'd call. But not everyone knows someone, or not everyone's confident enough to ask someone, because they worry that you'll think they're a bit nuts. and they say that, you know, I have got things going bump in the night, help. So I can understand that. But yeah, I do. The history thing is yeah, I love the fact I get to go into these really old buildings without anyone else, or say 15 people there, and I just get to explore.
Right.
You know, I do enjoy that bit, but yeah.
But, you know, it's a nice thing about the TV shows. I remember when we first started doing this, people, you know, we'd have magnets on our cars that say orbs and all that, and they'd be, well, you know, when you show up, can you not have nothing on your car? We don't want people to know. But now that the TV shows came out, people are more open to it, which is really cool, because, you know, now they're like, hey, you know, I got something going on. I don't care how you come here. You know, now we have an ambulance that we drive around, and that's our
like the Ghostbusters hearse.
Yeah. Well, that's just a big ambulance. And but we use it as central command. I mean, that's where we have all our monitors and everything else. But you know, back then you wouldn't be able to do that because people kind of freak out on you, you know. But now it's more open, and you know, I'll wear a shirt and I'll go to a restaurant, I'll be eating, somebody will walk up, hey, I read your shirt, and they'll just pull up a chair and start telling me ghost stories, you know, and it's kind of neat, you know. It's more open than what it used to be.
Very much so. Very much so. I think my parents are still a bit sort of, well, they sort of a bit like try not to admit it, but my dad, who is the biggest skeptic out, he's an engineer by trade, you know, even he started to ask me questions, and he can't sort of explain away some of the stuff I've shown him and told him and experience, and you know, even he will sort of I think, who was he talking? He was talking to someone about, and they were laughing about ghost hunting, and he went, you should have a word with my daughter, she'll put you straight. And it was like, go Dad.
That's pretty cool.
So it's getting there. And then when mum's at the school where my kids go to, they'll come up to, are you Penny who does the paranormal stuff? Well, and I'm like, yeah, that's me. So yeah, I agree, it's getting a lot more acceptable to talk about it without people automatically thinking you're a, you know, devil worshipper or something like that. So talking about devil worship, which is quite scary, what's been your scariest experience to date?
The scariest experience, wow, I'm trying to think back. I want to say, I remember the first time we did this ship out here in Ohio, and I remember I was sitting there, and you know, I was like, well, you know, I'm in your room, you know, can you talk to me? And all of a sudden I felt something pull my ear. And like literally grabbed my ear, and I jumped up, and as I jumped up, my ear still pulled downward. It's almost like I was scolded. And, you know, I started freaking out because I never thought I'd experience something like that, you know. And to me, and then I think actually that moment, I was like, what in the world happened? And then I got an EVP that said, stop that, go away, you know. And when I play that back, it kind of gave me chills because, you know, whatever was there was not happy with me being there.
So was this a male voice on the EVP or a female voice?
It was a male. It was absolutely 100% male.
Right.
Yep. And there was only two of us in that room, and I know Chris didn't do it. And I know that what I heard was another voice that came through, and it was almost like it wasn't happy from being in his room. But I would say that was probably one of the most scariest. You know, I've had several different experiences. I mean, we're like super scary, but you know, they give you chills. They make you think about what you're doing.
Yeah. I would have thought being pinned down as a child by something would be pretty scary.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was talking more as an investigator-wise.
Okay.
But yeah, going back, that would be one of the most scariest things that ever happened to me. But as an investigator and being on cases, the ship, I believe, was probably one of my scariest moments.
So was it the captain's room you were in?
Yes, absolutely. We were in the captain's room, and you know, I started. I got a little angry because I wanted something to happen, and I think I was becoming disrespectful, and I think that's when it did that, and that's when I learned not to. You know, doing this for such a long time, I learned that, you know, you become a part of them, like you said, or like we were having a conversation earlier. You know, they were human. They were human at one. They were people. and become a part of them when you go in that environment. You know, if you're going to go into Grandma Susie's house that somebody believes she's haunting, you're not going to go in there and provoke her, because you're not going to get anything to happen. But, you know, you come in and you be part of them. You treat them with respect, and usually that's when you get an answer. And that's when I started to learn, hey, you know, you got to respect the spirits and, you know, be respectful and treat them the same way you would treat them as they were living.
Yep.
And that's how you'll get better responses.
Yep. Yep. I must admit, one of the forts I went to, we know that during World War II it was used as one of the officers', I think it was the CO's sort of office. It was originally it had been a sort of bedroom for officers when the fort was more of a barracks, but during World War II, when it was more of an observation point, and I knocked on the door and asked if I could come in, and one of my friends was with me, was killing themselves laughing, and I said, if that was an officer in there, that's what I'd do.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I'd do. And we had lights going on and off. We had sort of REM pods going a bit nuts and everything, but it's kind of it was almost, I almost used it as a trigger as well, as a kind of a trigger thing to kick something into action, as opposed to storming in and forcing it. It was more of a respectful trigger, I suppose.
And you know, I've seen videos of people posting online, and you know, they're screaming and yelling at these spirits, and you know, and then you still watch it, and they're not showing no evidence. And obviously, you're probably not getting anything just because of the way you're behaving. And you know, it's all how you approach an investigation. I remember we did a prison. It's called Moundsville Prison, and we were walking around, and we were acting like one of the prisoners. You know, Chris and I are like, you know, hey, you know, we're gonna shank you, and you know, we're just kind of walking around and acting like them because we're trying to draw out some sort of spirit. And you know, we ended up going upstairs, and we were still doing it. And one of the girls that was with us, she's like, why are you guys being so disrespectful like that? You know, why don't you guys stop that and talk normal? We're like, really? So Chris is like, well, what do you want me to do? Ask them if they want to crochet. And we went back and played. He goes, do you like to crochet? And then we went back and played the recording, and we get a male voice that says yes. Well, we didn't realize we were in the psych ward part. So, you know, the tables turn. You know, now you're in a different area, but we weren't paying attention to that part. And sure enough, that's when we got a response. Out of that whole time we were up there, that's the only response we got. That's nice. So, you know, that's when you learn, you know, become a part of them, you know, become a part of their environment. My motto is, you are in life what you're going to be in death. You know, your energy carries into the afterlife. Through your good person, that's going to carry into the afterlife. So, you know, and that's the way we approach it now. You know, we become a part.
But you see, what you've just said there about the fact you didn't realise straight away that you're in a psych ward, that's where I have this conversation with a lot of people and there's always opposing views. Some people think it's useful to know the history of a place before you go in it. Some people don't like to know the history. They like to go in blind. Now, my sort of thing is that it's hard for me to go into a place completely blind. Apart from doing this show, I read a lot anyway. I'm that kind of person. I tend to know a bit about things. But surely knowing that was the psych ward of the prison, you could have adjusted your behaviour.
Absolutely. That's where research, you know, does come in. And like you said, I like to know a little bit of history of a place. I mean, you know, I don't have to know exactly everybody that died at a historical place, but, you know, I like to know something about the place. And, you know, when you get involved in an investigation, you kind of just, you just kind of start doing your own thing, and you don't even realize where you're at. And that's where Chris and I didn't even realize we were at. We were just kind of walking around and doing our thing, and next thing you know, we're in the psych ward, and that's when we get a different response. But you know, I believe if you go in an investigation, you should do some research into it. Now, when we do residential, when we're helping families, I like to know as much as possible, because you know, you're going to go up a different kind of spirit. It's a place that nobody's known about, you know. a prison and those places, they have a lot of documented deaths. A house don't. So
it's a lot harder to find out the information.
Right. So you're kind of going in blind when you do residential investigations anyways, but I do like to know a little bit of history about the location.
See, what I don't like to know is any sort of known hauntings of a place when I go into an old, if I was going into a prison, if say I went into Mansfield prison, I'd probably watch programs on the prison and to get the layout, to understand what would have been where. But what I wouldn't want to know is, Jack Wright is always seen in this particular part of the prison. That kind of thing I wouldn't want to know, because I think that could then give me preconceptions as to what I was experiencing. But if I knew that, say, that was Al Capone's cell, I could go in there and sort of start asking after Al Capone, or I could go in there with something that would have appealed to, say, Al Capone. Right. But not necessarily knowing that if he haunted that cell or not, just knowing that was his cell once.
Right, absolutely.
Everyone's different. Everyone is different.
Right, we did a library about a month ago, and it was it's a huge library. It used to be an old mansion, and the family donated it to the county to make a library. And the woman was well known with some of the stars, and one of her best friends was Houdini.
Oh wow!
He came many times. I mean, he was there. The library actually has pictures of him on the wall and letters that he's written to them, and during the investigation there, we actually tried to reach out to Houdini. I wasn't expecting him to be haunting there, but you never know.
Yeah. And
we didn't get any responses from him, but just knowing a little bit of that history of he has been there and he's been good friends with them. We still did try, but we didn't get any response.
Yeah. No, I say I don't always like to know any of the hauntings, because then if I have I had this fort that I visited, I experienced something, and I was quite sort of blown away by what I experienced. And one of the owners of the group, she went, "It's interesting, you read that," and she handed me over this thing about hauntings at the fort, and what had just happened to me was almost verbatim what was written in this book.
Oh wow, how cool!
And I'd never read the book.
Wow.
That's why I don't like to necessarily know what's happened before, so that side I can go in fresh.
Absolutely.
But yeah, say everyone's different. So, what sort of places? You're saying you like to help people in their own homes and everything, which I understand completely. But if you could choose some places to investigate, anywhere in the world, where would you like to go?
I would definitely pick Alcatraz.
Yeah.
I would definitely love to go there. That's one of my bucket lists.
Have you been there as a visitor?
No, I haven't. I've never been there at all, so I'd love to go there. Alcatraz. I'm sorry, I said Alcatraz.
Yeah.
Dracula's Castle.
All right.
That would definitely be probably my top place that I'd love to go.
Okay.
Yeah, that's definitely, just because of the stories and the history of what happened there, and how bad he was, and what he did to some of the people. Yes, what he did to some of those people there, and I would imagine there's got to be so much energy locked up in that location. Even if I didn't get to investigate it, I would just love to be there, just to experience the place.
Yeah.
But that would definitely be one place I'd love to investigate.
Yeah. Anywhere else?
Trying to think. Definitely those two. Yeah, this sounds. I don't think anybody's ever done it, but Auschwitz.
Oh, I wouldn't want to investigate there.
I mean, I would just love to ask some questions, and out of respect, and see what kind of answers I get. But I don't think they would allow that there. But that would definitely be another. I'd love to go.
We had a big conversation about this. I can't remember whether, I don't think it was my show. I think it was one of my colleagues' shows about places, and most I think I couldn't do it there, and I know that they don't allow them. They don't allow them, and if they think people are trying to communicate with the spirits by using like equipment or SB7s or anything like that, they're asked to leave.
Oh, I'm sure. But that would be, just something, just the historical part of it,
I've never been. That's somewhere that's on my to-do list one day is to go, and but I nearly got to go to Dachau not so long ago, which is obviously one of the other well-known camps.
Right.
But it's.
Did you go just as a visitor?
I didn't get to go in the end. We had to call it off at the last minute. But I would just go as a visitor. I wouldn't want. I don't think I'd want to open up that pain for them. Do you know what I mean? That fear. And,
it would
agony.
Be strange. But, just what they went through, and I could just imagine the last moment. They didn't even know what was going on.
No.
They were led to these buildings, and next thing you know, they're being gassed. And it's sad. It's a sad part of history.
I actually had a client who was imprisoned at Auschwitz in my day job. She actually had the tattoo on her arm. She escaped from Auschwitz.
Wow.
She wasn't actually Jewish. She was one of the Polish workers who was captured at the beginning of the war by the Germans to work in their work camps. And she escaped, I think it's from 7 or 8 of their work camps, and so gradually got put in a more and more secure one. And her last one she was at was Auschwitz. And she escaped when they started when they knew that they were about to be liberated by the Allied forces. They started the death marches to march them back to Germany to kill off as many of them as possible, and she escaped on the death marches. Talking to her and seeing her tattoo on her arm. Yeah.
that's got to be a touchy subject for him. I mean, I'm sure she lost her family. No,
she didn't. That was the amazing thing. No, what was more this story? If you like history, this story it still blows my mind. I've told it so many times to people. Her husband, they weren't. Neither of them were Jewish, but her husband was captured at the beginning when the Russians were still on the German side, and he was put in a Russian gulag, and he was a trained pilot, a Polish trained pilot. Anyway, she found out that she was pregnant literally just after he'd been taken. He didn't know that she had a baby on the way. She was taken from her kitchen, leaving her 5-month-old daughter in her crib. Her neighbours, I mean, I'm summarising this quite a bit, but her neighbours saw it happen and went and took the baby and sent her off into the countryside in Poland, ironically on the trains, to be looked after by friends of theirs, because they didn't know whether this lady was going to come back. And most people assumed her husband was dead because people didn't tend to survive the gulags in Russia. Well, when the Russians swapped sides and came over to the Allied, they realised they had all these soldiers in their prisons. So they kind of released them, and they made up their own fighting force. Well, they all got told you can go wherever you want, and most opted for, because a lot of them were Jewish, had opted for sort of like Israel and places like that. Well, he asked to go to the UK. And started being trained as a Spitfire pilot. Well, at the last minute, they asked him to switch on to Lancaster bombers because they needed Lancaster pilots. He managed to survive, I think, flying sorties for nearly 3 years on the Lancasters, which anyone who knows about Lancasters will know that your average lifespan was 12 weeks.
Wow.
And and when his wife escaped, she managed to make it to France, and there was a Red Cross parcel waiting for it in France with all this dried fruit in, and she was like, I don't know who sent me this. The only person that knows I like this particular dried fruit is my husband. Well, he's dead. He's been dead years. And they were like, no, he isn't. He's in the UK. And they got her back to the UK, and she was reunited with her husband. And then it transpired their little girl who was like, must have been about 4 at that point, was still alive, and she got shipped over to the UK as well.
Oh, how cool!
Isn't that an amazing?
Wow.
That's a true story. That is a true story. And
wow.
I said to her, I said, you could make a film out of this. It would. Nobody would believe it.
Say that.
No, and she doesn't want to, because she doesn't think she did anything special. And I was like, you escaped from 8 Nazi work camps, and you don't think you did anything special.
Wow, just to hear that story, that's chilling.
It's mind blowing, isn't it? It's just absolutely.
Wow.
And yeah, I say I had the honour and the privilege of meeting this lady.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. This is why I love history.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about.
Isn't it? Isn't it? Well, I think what we'll do now is we'll take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to start on the death car. And also the links to, I think it probably is the worst serial killings that Ohio has ever seen.
Absolutely.
The torso killings. So bear with me, anyone. We won't be long.
Hello, Harry Price here. Good evening. If there's nothing myself and everybody else enjoy here on the other side more is the sit back and relax and listen to Parasearch Radio with its paranormal news, views and reviews from across the UK and beyond. Make sure to find out more about them on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web, whatever they are, to keep up to date with all their broadcasts throughout the week. And I hope you enjoy them as much as we do over here. Hello? Is anybody there?
Okay, so we're back. You still with us, Karlo?
Yes, I'm here.
Awesome. So, the death car. Now, this story, it's when I first saw it on Haunted Case Files, I actually couldn't believe it, because to me it is something like out of a horror story what happened. Mm-hmm. Now, for anyone who doesn't know this story, it was a passenger car. I believe it was called the Lackawanna Limited.
Yes.
Lackawanna Limited, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. And it was a passenger train, 11 carriages, and it was hot-footing it to upstate New York. This was in August of 1943. So, obviously America at that time had other things on its mind, seeing as we were in the thick of World War II at that point.
True, yep.
But this passenger car, it was trying to make up time because it was 20 minutes late, and it was travelling at around sort of 70 to 80 miles an hour on the train line that it was on, and it was coming past a freight yard, and the engineers at the freight yard thought the train had passed, so started to release a freight train onto the track. Realising their error, and the approaching passenger train also realising that the track wasn't completely clear, they couldn't get the freight train out of the way in time, and the passenger train collided with it. Is that a reasonable sort of observation?
You get the story?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got the story pretty good right now.
Yeah, thank you. But the horrific part of it is, train crashes themselves, they're nothing new, they're nothing unusual. They sadly still happen all around the world, all the time. Mm-hmm. But the horrific, and I'm not saying that with any sarcasm in my voice, it's truly horrific thing, was that as the Lackawanna Limited hit the freight train, it sliced the actual sort of steam engine part of the freight train, releasing boiling hot water and boiling steam into one of the passenger cars, which basically had the effect of boiling all those people in that car alive. Mm-hmm. Now, this is as horrific as we're, I'm actually not even going into some of the details that I found in some of the newspaper reports from the time, which are available on the internet if you want to have a look. Now, as a total, 28 people died that day at the scene. One of those actually being the steam engine engineer, driver, who'd actually tried to jump out as he realised there was going to be a crash and ended up being crushed under his own freight train. But the others were those poor passengers who were in the car. And what really breaks my heart is these weren't all adults. There were children, and in fact the youngest was a little girl of 5 years old called Mary Ann Garnbach. Now, Cleveland itself as a place was probably, would it be fair to say, built on the railroads? The railroads were a very important part.
Absolutely.
Of it.
Yeah, it's definitely a place for railroads. We have a lot of train yards.
Yeah. Now, what the reason we then come back to this story, so that's what happens. So we've got at least 26, possibly 28 people die as a result. Now, there were something in the region of 120, 130 people injured, from minor to serious injuries and all those kind of things. And in fact, when the rescue workers were trying to identify people, some people were so badly burned from the steam and the hot water, so not just the hot water itself, but the steam as well off that train engine, they had trouble identifying them. I can't imagine what that would have been like to have been working on it. It must, Frums, it must have been... I genuinely can't imagine. But fast forward sort of 70 years, and the passenger car itself is been restored, and it's now at a place called the Midwest Railway Preservation Society, which is where you come in, isn't it, Karlo?
Yep, absolutely. What happened was I was doing some research, and I came across this old roundhouse in Cleveland, which I had no idea about the death car at that time. And it kind of piqued my interest because I was reading up the history, how long it's been around, and what they do there. So I wrote a letter to the gentleman, the curator that takes care of the place, and asked them if any chance I could talk to him and about the history and maybe some ghostly phenomena that may be happening there. You know, all of a sudden I got a phone call, and it was Steve, the gentleman that runs the place, and he had mentioned that he's like, wow, you know, I never thought I'd get a letter like this, you know, and he's like, man, there's so much stuff that happens here. We get people that come here, and they'll take pictures, and they'll get apparitions in their photos, and I was just amazed just hearing that. And then he's like, yeah, we have the thing called a death car. And I'm like, death car? He goes, yeah, it was a train that was in a major accident in Wayland, New York. 26 people died on the train, 2 more at the hospital. And they, what happened was, you know, the 2 trains collided, like you said. You can imagine the people on there. Some of these people inhaled that steam and caught on fire internally. So, you know, I mean, you know, when he was telling me the story, you know, I was getting chills just hearing it. And he's like, yeah, we actually have this train here. And I'm thinking, is this train like just all tore up from that time? Is it just like trashed? And he goes, oh, no, we still use it, and we take it out on excursions. And I'm like, for real? He goes, you're welcome to come down and investigate it. Well, at that time, Chris, myself, and another investigator, we were doing this thing called haunted vehicles. We were kind of doing research on vehicles that may have spirits attached to themselves. And it was just something that we were doing on the side, just to experiment with it. And we thought this would be a perfect thing to go investigate. So we went down there, and, you know, the moment, you know, we came up to the train, you know, you start having all those thoughts going through your head of what happened. And, you know, just, you know, I knew there's got to be some sort of energy locked up in that location. And the moment I stepped on that train, the 3 of us once we got on there, I can't even explain it. And I'm by any means, I'm not psychic whatsoever or anything like that. But, you know, doing this for so long, you become more in tune to your environment that you're dealing with. And I felt this heavy, heavy feeling inside my chest. I mean, it was when you walk in there, and until this day, and I've been on this train, you know, 100 times, if not more. And every time you go in here, you could feel the energy of what happened in there. It's like it's bottled up in this train. It's like the weirdest experience I could ever tell you about. And Steve would mention to us that one of the main problems they would have is the windows. You got to understand now, this is a moving train, so these windows have clips on the side where you have to push the clips together, then move up, and they lock into place.
Mm-hmm.
And these bars that actually lock into the sides. So, to have these windows to fall on their own, it's very hard. But they'll be working on the train, just doing their thing or cleaning it, and the windows would just start slamming. They would have like two windows happen at the same time. And, he thinks it's because the spirits are trying to keep that steam out. They're reliving that moment, so they're trying to keep the windows down. And I remember when we first did our investigation, when we did the first investigation, we gotten so many EVPs, and the spirits in there, I think they were just excited that somebody wanted to communicate with them, and they were responding so well. We went back another time we were shooting a pilot. It was called Haunted Vehicles. It was with Pilgrim Productions, which is the guys that work with TAPS, the Ghost Hunters show on Sci-Fi. Yep. And we had some of their crew with us, and I remember we were filming in there, and when we went in, we didn't know the windows were up, and we were standing in there, and one of the windows slammed so hard it shook. The crew guys started running out of there. It was like the funniest thing. It was like the scariest thing, and they actually mentioned that, that was probably one of the most frightening things that's ever happened to them. But, the activity in this thing is just so amazing. But, on the other hand, when you go in there, you just think about what they went through that day, and, if you go in there with respect, you'll get good answers. And that's what we know. So, we treat them with respect. And, but,
the thing is, knowing what they've gone through, how could you not?
Right.
How could you not go in there? I was in two minds whether to do this show because of how horrific their deaths were. And it's why I keep wanting to say to people, I'm not doing this in a gory kind of. It's a way. I bet there's an awful lot of people that don't know that this happened, and
right.
That it really did. I remember watching the episode of Haunted Case Files that it was on, and I think as they were described, the narrator was describing what happened. I remember I was sitting there on my sofa with my hand over my mouth, kind of horrified at that kind of just trying to imagining the sheer terror and pain and So what sort of EVPs have you managed to get from there?
I remember, one time we were asking a question, can you talk to us? What do you, could you respond to anything that we're doing? Could you touch any of the equipment? And I remember getting a clear EVP, and it says, "We are dead." When I heard that, I played it back several times. I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. They're trying to respond to what I'm asking them to do, but they're telling me, look, we're dead. And, just the thoughts of what happened and, and what they're going through in the afterlife. Are they reliving that moment all the time being on that train? But, we don't have the right to do a cleansing and blessing there. The train yard owns that train, and they actually respect those spirits. They don't allow people just to come in there and taunt them and start, being negative towards them, and that's the good thing about it. They're trying to preserve the whole history of the train.
So why do you not feel that doing a blessing or almost helping some of them move on, why would you not? I mean, I've got my own sort of thoughts on it, but why would you not feel comfortable doing that?
Well, it's not our place to do it.
Right.
Just because, it's not. If they asked us to do it, we'd be more than happy to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's their train, and we have no right to do that. And If they want to keep their spirits, that's their choice. And
Right.
So we don't just go into a place and try to get rid of spirits. It's definitely up to the venues to do that. But that's not our place to do that.
Well, what I was saying is my own view of it. I think it's almost a bit like a ship that's gone down.
Right.
It's their resting place.
Yeah, it is. And
you just hope they're not caught in the loop. I really just hope they aren't caught in the loop of the accident. And, if they can communicate and say, we're dead, hopefully they're not.
Right. It's something, it's a situation where, you're torn into two. You want to help them move on, but it's like, again, it's not our place to do that. But it is part of the history of the train, and I think they're comfortable there because I don't hear any negative stuff about it.
Right.
And nothing that negative's ever happened to us. I mean, obviously, when you go in there, a lot of times we'll do this thing called we'll do solitary. We'll go in completely by ourselves with nobody around, and that's when the atmosphere changes because now you're more vulnerable. You're open to the spirit realm, and if you sit down and start talking to them, it seems like things calm down a little bit. You feel more comfortable being in there, But it's all how you approach it, and I never show them any disrespect. I always, try to talk to them just like if they were living. And a lot of times they'll communicate with you.
So has anyone ever heard screams or that kind of sort of stuff from there?
Yeah, some of the workers would hear what sounds like a woman scream. And I believe that may be a residual haunt itself.
Yeah.
The windows slam. I know, like, they'll take the train on excursions, or they'll have like an open house, and some of the people coming out will say, well, what was that guy that was dressed like a captain, one of the train guys? And they're like, there's nobody back there but us.
Yeah.
And then some people that, have no idea about the train will walk on and they'll start having a hard time breathing. They'll have this heavy feeling in there. There's a lot of different reports that come from that train.
So there's probably, without sort of simplifying things, there's probably some intelligent spirits, interactive spirits still there, but there's also the residual energy that's not going to be feeling the pain of what happened to them, but it's on a loop, and that could be where the chest and everything comes in.
Absolutely. I think there's both there, because we did get intelligent responses, doing the EVP sessions, and then, they'll actually communicate by touching K2s. We've seen shadows, like we'll be sitting there and you'll see a shadow go by, across the windows. There's so many different, like I said, I've been in there probably 100 times, and every time I go in there, I have some sort of experience. And, again, they don't mean no harm. They're there for a reason. It's a tragedy to happen, and I think that's just a resting place.
But you were saying to me you were there this last night, or this weekend, just gone. So did you have anything happen to you? We brought in the SOS Connect, and I don't know what your thoughts are on that device. We're still experimenting with it a little bit, but it was kind of unique because I remember we had a group in there, and nothing really happened. I mean, we didn't get any stick figures that popped up or anything like that, and they all left. And I decided to tear it down because it was the last group that came in there, and all of a sudden, two of them pop up, and it was I'm looking at the screen. I'm like, holy cow, I'm just two stick figures. I'm like, hello, I start talking to them. And the one actually looks like it picks up luggage, like it was picking up something and it was putting it on top of the luggage rack. And then it disappeared. Wow.
And yeah, it was pretty neat. And then I know a first group I had in there, we were talking, what was Dorothy? I think her name was Dorothy. And every time we mentioned her, a stick figure would appear in one of the seats, and it would always show up in that same seat. So I don't know if it was the section she was in where she was sitting when the accident happened, or maybe where she passed away at. But the stick figure would pop up in that location.
So where Dorothy
And-
wasn't a guest. You were using Dorothy as one of the names of one of the victims.
Yes, Dorothy was one of the victims. Yep. She was on the train when I think she was a mother of 5, if I'm not mistaken.
Crumbs. Oh, it was a horrible thing to happen, but I do hope that the souls that are still there are kind of enjoying the company they're getting.
Right, and a lot of people, when they go in there, it's funny because a lot of times we'll get more experiences like with the first group we'll take in there, and then after the second and third group, you really ain't getting nothing. And I think that they show themselves, they use enough energy to show themselves here and there and do their thing, and then they're done. And they don't, like you said, they don't come out on cue.
No.
A spirit comes out when it feels comfortable.
Yeah, definitely. But we're talking about the spirits and comfortable. The actual site of the Midwest Railway Preservation Society is literally a few minutes, from what I understand, from, is it called the Cleveland Flats? Is that what it's called?
Yes.
The Cleveland Flats? Which is basically a riverbed type area, from what I understand. Now, I have to say, I have actually been to Cleveland, but I was 7. So I don't really remember much of it.
Oh, wow.
My dad worked there for a while, and we did stay there. I do remember that. I think we stayed in a Sheraton hotel. I think it was a Sheraton, something like that. But I don't really remember much of it, because I was only little. But I do know that this horrific accident took place on the 30th of August, 1943. But on this site where the car is actually now its home was actually also linked excuse me to the worst serial killings that Cleveland and possibly Ohio has ever seen, something called the Torso killings, or also known as the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run. Now Kingsbury Run was basically, I suppose in a nutshell, was a shanty town. Was where back in the 1930s, anyone from a history knowledge will know that was when the Great Depression hit, and this shanty town had sort of popped up. Literally, people were sort of using whatever shelter they could, whether it was wood to sort of construct almost like sheds or cardboard boxes or quite ramshackle housing. And it was one of those places that most sort of, I suppose, your non-poor didn't want to acknowledge existed. Would that be a correct assumption? They sort of kind of ignored it, tried to it wasn't there, but it was right by the rail tracks.
Right. And
during the Depression, and I've just been reading up on something to do with this about a guy who was actually in Alcatraz in the 1940s. He rode the rails during the Depression, jumping on and off trains and things to get to next places to try and find a couple of days' work, and was a transient. And we do come back to this an awful lot in kind of murders, and especially in the 1920s and 1930s, the railways had a massive connection with it. And I find it quite interesting that the death car is also on the site of where some of these killings, not saying the killings took place, but some of the bodies were actually dumped. Now, you also did a show, I think it was ironically called Haunted History, on the Torso killings, didn't you, Karlo?
Yes. Yeah, we did.
Now, nobody ever knew. There was no one's ever been arrested for these killings. And the very famous Elliot Ness of Untouchables fame was actually based in Cleveland at that point, and I think he was called the safety officer or something like that, and he was brought in to investigate them. And was paired up with a local detective, a hardened sort of learnt on the job type detective called Peter Murillo. And yeah, the saddest thing about it is there was at least 12 victims that were acknowledged as being victims, and only something in the region of 3 of them were ever identified. Now, do you want to tell people why they weren't identified, or shall I?
Well,
like the actual what happened to the bodies is what I'm getting at.
What had happened is, some of the people that were missing were the people that were, they call them the outcasts. They were the throwaways. They were living in the Kingsbury Run area. They would, like you said, they would build these little shanties or live in tents. It was a Great Depression. They had nowhere to go, and they were easy victims. And the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run would go around and pick people off, and a lot of them were prostitutes. There was a tattooed gentleman that he killed, and they would find the torsos laying around town, but they wouldn't find the heads. And the only head they did find was the tattooed man. This killer was so brazen that he would actually he left one body, a torso, under Elliot Ness's window at his office. This is the only case that Elliot Ness has never solved. He had theories that it was one of the doctors, but, nothing's panned out. When we got involved doing this episode, Pilgrim Productions actually reached out to us and asked us if we'd get involved because they knew we were investigating in that area. And they had us go to certain locations where some of the bodies were found and do some EVP work and stuff like that. And I remember talking to the gentleman over at the rail yard, and they would tell me that, they believe it was somebody that was working the railroad. Just because there was bodies found in Pennsylvania, a lot in Ohio, and then some in Indiana, and some believe it may also be the Black Dahlia case that's out in California. And to get around back then, the fastest way was by railroad. And it was kind of a cool theory because I never thought of that, and it would make a lot of sense because he could come in, he was the railroad run right past Kingsbury Run. I mean, he could have jumped off, did a murder, and been back on a railroad within an hour. I mean, he could have done it that quick and been gone to the next state and then come back and do it again. So, but yeah, he would just leave the torsos, but they would never find the heads of the bodies or the people.
Well, the thing is, the torso, it wasn't just torsos. There was an awful lot of things as part of his MO. We say him, we presume it was a man because what was actually done to these people would have needed quite a lot of size and strength. But the bodies were naked, decapitated. The men tended to be castrated or emasculated, whatever word you want to use. And the interesting thing was, an awful lot of them had some kind of chemical preservative on their skin, as though whoever it was trying to preserve the bodies or the parts of bodies that you had. And we talk about the Black Dahlia killing, which was in January of 1947. Now, anyone who remembers that, she was basically, she was sliced in half, and all her blood had been drained. Now, I don't know whether Elliot Ness thought they were linked or not. He'd kind of fallen out of favour of the law enforcement by that point. But there was a letter in January of 1939 sent to the police force in Ohio, supposedly from the killer. And I'm kind of paraphrasing what it says here, but basically it said that he'd gone to California to perfect his art, and that he was creating something, and once it was created, basically everyone would be very impressed. He threw an awful lot of curveballs at people because, to begin with, they thought it was something to do with homosexual killings because it was just men that were being found. And then they found parts of a woman who became known as Lady of the Lake in Lake Erie, I believe it was. But she had actually been killed at least a year previously when they started doing the post-mortem. Peter Merlo was still investigating the case when he died in the late 1940s, and he believed there was over 50 victims, at least, of this killer. Yeah,
now, that's what they claim.
Yeah. yes, a lot of people thought he might be a surgeon or a doctor of some sort because the cuts, the beheadings, excuse me, which is even worse. They weren't, the men weren't dead when they were decapitated. The decapitation is what killed them, because a lot of them had, when they did find their wrists, the ligature marks, they'd struggled as their blood had stopped. So they believed it was a doctor. Now, I don't. I would say, judging by what happened, it's more likely to have been someone like a butcher or a hunter, because they believe it was a clean, big, sort of heavy knife, almost like a meat cleaver, that went through the neck. Now, I don't think a doctor would actually just slice through like that. A doctor would be a bit more...
be more precision type cuts.
Surgical, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think these were more clean cuts, and you had to go through the vertebrae and stuff, and whoever was doing it knew how to do it. And that's why they called him the Mad Butcher. And I believe, I think they were just more or less trying to pinpoint, to have a starting point to pin somebody. And, I think that's when they were going after Dr. Sweeney, I believe it was.
Yeah, Francis Sweeney, yeah.
Yeah, and, I think he was more, they were trying to pinpoint it on him, but they never found any evidence of him doing that.
No.
So.
The biggest evidence was that he failed 2 lie detector tests. And
right.
That's what made them decide it must have been him.
And I think whoever did that, was never got caught. I think he just had his run and did his thing, and he might have just stopped at one point, but I don't think it was Dr. Sweeney that was doing that.
So when you did the investigations in some of the areas for haunted history, did you pick up anything?
I went to the alley where they found one of the prostitutes, and I remember when we went there, I remember seeing a shadow go across the wall, and this is an alley, there was nobody around, and I go, were you the person that died here? Or were you part of the torso murders? And I got a woman's voice that said yes.
Wow.
Which, gave me the chills, because, I kind of validated that, that was the victim.
Yeah.
And, I started asking more questions, but I didn't get any other responses, and I wish I would have, because, just to validate that even more, I could have asked if it was a doctor or if it wasn't, did she know who it was, or anything like that, but I didn't get any other responses. We did go to another location where they found a body underneath the bridge, actually the Kingsbury Bridge, and it was kind of weird because we were doing the EVP session. We were actually using the Ovilus, and we were getting on the Ovilus where we asked, "How did you die?" And shot came through, and I'm like, okay, this is weird because I don't think anybody's been shot.
No.
And as we're doing this EVP session, this couple were walking the tracks, and they're like, hey, are you guys filming the news story about the murder? And I'm like, well, we're doing the torso murder. And she goes, well, my brother got shot down here. I thought you were doing the news report on him.
Oh, my God.
And it had nothing to do with the torso murder, but we had another spirit coming through. And I was like, well, we just got a response that said shot. She's like, oh, my God. She started, telling us what happened. And her brother got murdered. He got shot down. I guess it was a drug deal gone bad, and somebody shot him down underneath the bridge. And, we had no idea of what was even coming through the Ovilus was even making sense until they walked up. And, but yeah, we were actually getting a response from a different spirit at that location.
Wow.
Yeah.
So does the place have a kind of, does sort of the where the railway station is, the some of these sites, do they have a kind of a morbid feel to them, or do they feel quite sort of normal? It
feels, you're talking around the area around the roundhouse, like the outside of it. It's normal. I mean, because it's changed over the years, because now you got a steel yard there. There's stores down there. They changed the area so much. But when we went to locations, you knew that's where the bodies were found. So you still had that feeling of dread, you would say. But yeah, the area has changed. I mean, the first body was found within a mile of the roundhouse. And, but yeah, it's changed quite a bit in that area. It doesn't look nothing like it used to.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But, the historical part of it was just so, it was just amazing doing the research and being involved with something like that and being able to investigate it, because it's such a big part of history of Cleveland,
Wow.
and I don't know if we got the answers, for everybody, but, my theory on it is that it was somebody that did work the railroad, that was getting in and out of town as quick as possible, and doing his murders and just moving on, and I think he was just running the railroad and just maybe he was doing it for fun. I mean, just people out there like that. There are.
I just find it amazing how the link into the death car and the railways, and then to this, I just find it amazing that they're all linked together, and I do hope that those, not only are the spirits that are left in the carriage are kind of in a weird kind of way enjoying what they get to experience now, but also the victims of the torso killings that were never identified and are just down as John Doe or Jane Doe in the records. I do hope they found some kind of peace, because the fact that there's at least 10 people that nobody even knew who they were, and you mentioned the tattooed man. The story that I find heartbreaking is that they created almost like a quasi death mask. They did a sort of a copy of his face, and they exhibited it at there was a fair, wasn't there, a convention type fair being held in Cleveland, and they reckon over 100,000 people would have seen it, and not one person recognised him. They never gave the man a name. I find heartbreaking.
If you go to the Cleveland Police Department, they have a museum downstairs, and that face is still on display there. The original face they have there. Again, nobody cared about people back then. They were just throwaways. I remember another story when we were doing the investigations. We went to the bridge where the head was found of the tattooed man, and I remember it was Chris, myself, and another investigator, and they were doing an EVP session. I started taking pictures. As I'm taking pictures, I noticed, and this is in the middle of July that we filmed this, and it was a nice night. There was no rain, nothing like that. And I seen this mist started to form. But Chris was doing the EVP session, and he was using his arm as a trigger object. Because he had a tattoo on his arm. And he's like, can you touch my arm? Can you do something? I have tattoos also. It's you. And he said he felt something brush up against his arm where his tattoo is. And he goes, were you the gentleman with the tattoos? And when we played back the recording, you could hear a slight male's voice say yes. So I think at that moment he was communicating with that spirit, because he was using his arm as a trigger object, and I think it was familiar with that, and then it had decided to respond. But yeah, the whole case and the whole story itself is just amazing. How it all evolved, and I wish it was solved, but I don't think it ever will now.
No.
Like you said, hopefully the spirits found peace and, are resting in peace and at a good place. Unfortunately, that's the way to go. But
yeah, wow.
But if you ever come to Cleveland, let us know, and we'll take you to the death car, and you can experience it yourself.
You're on. Well, I've got tattoos, so maybe I'll have to go to that bridge and see if I can get a poor man to tell me his name.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, we could take locations.
Yeah, awesome. So what have you guys got going on at the moment? I know we were saying you've got a second series of Haunted Case Files. that's just finished filming.
Yeah, we just wrapped that up back in end of March. It was. Where we got 8 episodes that we're going to be airing on, and then I also have a new episode that aired in Canada but hasn't aired here yet on Paranormal Survivor. So that should be airing here. And I don't know if you guys get that series done in the UK, but
I think we do. I recognise it. So yes, I think we do. Yeah.
And but Haunted Case File Season 2 should be coming out, I would say, September, October time.
Awesome. And if anyone wants to communicate with you guys, they can go to the Orbs Facebook page, which we'll put the link up whilst this interview's playing out. So if anyone wants to go and sort of like the page and have a chat with the guys about any of the things we've talked about, I'm sure they'll be more than happy to share their experiences. I haven't checked with you. You're more than happy to share your experiences on there, but I'm sure you are, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love hearing stories and what people experience, and I'm happy to talk to people because you got to love this field, and if you love it and you have the passion for it, and being involved in it, it's so exciting talking to people because I love hearing your stories and everybody else's because everybody's got such a cool story to tell, of experience they had, and
I agree,
and how it happened, and a lot of times you just think, man, is that for real? Is that really true? But it's so cool to hear those stories.
It is. Well, thank you ever so much for being my guest tonight, Karlo. I really, really do appreciate it. I might be sort of trying to bribe you to come on again next year, maybe to talk about one of the other places we were talking about off air. You never know.
Sure.
Oh, people regret when they say that to me. But thank you again. Thank you ever so much. Everyone go over and follow the Orbs page, which we're going to put on as a link. Obviously, when the new series of Haunted Case Files is going to be shown in the UK, we'll be putting something on the page about that as well. But really, as long as none of you forget that we've got shows on 6 days of the week, all the other brilliant shows that we do with Kaz, with Kerry, with Paul, with Mark, and Claire, and all the other people who do their shows on a variety of subjects, they're always there for you to listen to. But until next week, my friends, all that leaves me to say is have a good evening, sleep tight, and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.